Sick. Nasty.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the June, or no, I'm sorry, July 7th edition of Collect Our Cousins, Engaging White People in the Struggle for Full Democracy. I'm Karen Fleshman, founder of Racy Conversations and of the Collect Our Cousins live series. I created this series to help white Americans like me become more effective in our conversations with white people in our lives, to help us build an embodied anti-racist white culture, in the words of Resma Menachem. I'm featuring the people who inspire and teach me the most, like Parker here. White Americans, the battle for our democracy will not be won in courtrooms or in the streets. It must be won in white living rooms, neighborhood meetings, boardrooms, at our school board meetings, at our coffee table conversations with our own kids. As an anti racist, collecting my cousins often falls to the end of my to do list. Oh, I'll get to that next month. But I want to encourage everyone who's watching today to write a list of our friends and family we will collect this year. There are 21 million Americans, largely white, who believe that Donald Trump is the legitimate president and political violence may be necessary to restore him. These are our friends and family members, and we need to collect them. And with that, I would like to introduce our guest today. I am so grateful to you, Parker, for coming on the show. I'm really, really excited to engage in this conversation. And as we do, I would love if anyone's watching us and would like to say hello or has any questions for Parker to put those in the chat, and we will be happy to address those questions. But Parker, why don't you introduce yourself and share a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, so my name is Parker J. Hicks. I am 23. I'm a climber. I'm a writer. I do a podcast from time to time. I'm a traveler. Been to, where am I at now? 21 countries? 20, 22? I'm not sure. It's up there. And yeah, by complete happenstance, my mom knows Karen from high school, so going way back, and she listened to my podcast and was like, wow, you're actually kind of smart from time to time. You should come on my show, and we should talk about how to deal with white radicalism in the younger generations of white guys. So here I am, and there Karen is, and maybe you're here too. We don't know.
Yes. Hi, Jessica. Thank you for joining us. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for tuning in. So let's dive right in and talk about white radicalism among young white men. I mean, we are seeing mass shootings. We are seeing this rise in white supremacist beliefs and behavior across our country among young men. And there had been a hope, that with future generations that they would not follow the same beliefs about racism as their parents. But it seems among at least a subset of young white men, these beliefs are getting stronger and leading to more and more violence. Could you talk about what it is like, how it is to be a young white man in America right now, and why um, white supremacist violence and extremist messaging may resonate with some young white men in our country?
Oh boy. Okay. So I think a really important thing to remember is that for a lot of young white guys, there's two different Americas. There's the one that's a little bit more grounded in reality, which is full of struggling people to get, well-paying jobs, struggling to find your place in the world, and just a radical cultural shift. And for some people, either you kind of get with it and you're like, yeah, you're right, women should have rights. Oh, you're right, people of color should have rights because they're just people. And then there's another subset that perhaps they grew up in more right-leaning households, more conservative households, and they are struggling to get with the times. And so when there's such rapid shifting change, they're not really sure how to respond to it. And so it's scary for a lot of these kids. They don't know their place, and they're going to go up to a lot of these right-wing leaders that are parroting all these horrible things in their ears. And they're like, man, this guy is really talking about things that I agree with. And so either they start seeking it out, or they start just going down the path of radicalism through podcasts, and then through subreddits, and then through specialty forums, and then going to meetup groups. And then next thing you know, they're shooting up places. That's a very synopsized version of extreme radicalism, but that is definitely a way that it can happen.
Yes. Ruben says, hope is not a strategy. We need to counter the racist beliefs with facts and moral leadership. Confronting history factually is part of that. Thank you, Ruben.
Thanks, Ruben. I do like that. Unfortunately, these people don't want to listen to your facts. They don't care about what you historically have to say, because basically what you're saying is that a lot of their heroes, well, at least in their minds, heroes, big quotations there, are awful people, that they're monsters. Nobody wants to have their, oh, are we the baddies moments. They want the people to be heroes, and they want to still be on top. So it's like, if you ever got onto anybody waving a Confederate flag, and you're like, well, no, that was about slavery. Like, that's what the Civil War is about. They're like, no, it's about states' rights. Oh, no, it's an economic thing. They don't want to believe the reality, so therefore they're not going to.
Yes, and there's a whole full-on onslaught, banning the word gay. The Texas attempting to rename slavery as involuntary movement. Yes, this whole attempt, and they're re-educating high school teachers and other teachers to teach this very Christian-centric version of U.S. history. And of course, this is not a new phenomenon, right? From the advent of public education in our country, the Ku Klux Klan, the United Daughters of the Confederacy, etc., have tried to frame how young people are educated in this country to make it seem like slavery wasn't that bad and the Confederates were actual heroes.
Yeah. Something important to remember, though, is that even the Confederates were like, yeah, no, this is about slavery. We want to keep them. Like, they were pretty upfront about that. They never had any other illusions that it's like, well, no, we're here for the states' rights. They were like, we want the right to have slaves. Like, they never, like, they can say it all that they want, but there's a lot of, General Lee had documents and letters saying like, yeah, we should be able to keep the words that I'm not going to say.
Yes. So going back to then, how do we counter this messaging that these young white men are receiving, and what is effective in reaching them and helping them to develop a positive white male identity without harmful behaviors?
I think that's the $1 million question right there. I don't know. Well, for me, given my background, like, I grew up in a house of all women. My dad wasn't really in the picture that much. I went to very diverse schools. Like, my first girlfriend was Mexican. Like, it's just like, for me, it just wasn't ever like a thing that it's like, oh, they're different people. It's like, oh, they're just a different color. I can say that better, but like, I hope everyone listening knows what I mean by it when I say that. And then, like, I was always just really curious about the world. And so I think it's that if you don't encourage kids from a very, very young age to ask questions, answer their questions with honesty, not, oh, well, no, don't worry about that, or, oh, that's not correct at all, or, oh, America's the best place on the planet, you never need to go anywhere else. Like, that's not good messaging from the get-go. And just having them kind of just question everything, because that helped me out a lot to develop my own identity. Was, is this real? Is this true? Why is this true? Or why is this false? So if you don't encourage people to do that, then they're just going to listen to whoever they think is smarter than them and just go off of that by itself. And so for boy, I think one thing for certain is to not to get like too, can't think of a good word for this right now, but like if you're a parent and you are having, you have like a 13, 14, 15-year-old, let them watch and view and play what they want, but be aware of what they're doing, right? Because like as I said before, a huge path to radicalism is a lot of these hate groups they'll play Call of Duty, they'll play Fortnite, and then they'll start talking about whatever with who's ever in the lobby, and then some point they're like, oh, what do you think about Trump, or oh, what do you think about girls, and then if some of the kids take the bait, then they can start like explaining to them, like as an older person that speaks with authority, oh, well, like Trump's really the president, right? Like, how much fraud there was. And then a lot of these kids, they're there to play Fortnite. They're not going to like, well, wait, I'm going to pause my game and actually investigate this. A lot of them are just going to take it at face value. And then they become, quote unquote friends with these people. And it just keeps on going. It's like grooming for violence, basically.
Yes. And this is so, so, so important as parents that we monitor this. There was a journalist in Los Angeles who noticed that her young sons were starting to use the same terms that her trolls were using in their conversation. And so she went on their Instagram feed and saw that they are being targeted by white supremacists. But this is they're very psychologically astute. They test their messaging. They know developmentally what resonates with these young white boys, and they are preying on them in fora like video games and social media on TikTok, etc., etc. So yes, I think as parents we have to be super cognizant of what our children are hearing on these social media, and as you're saying, of presenting a counter narrative. Because if they, if we're raising the child in an environment where they're listening to Fox News and they're listening to Breitbart or other
Daily Wire,
then of course then they hear this on the Fortnite game, and it corresponds to what they're already hearing kind of in the home as acceptable information.
Yeah.
Hate groups have, oh, hi, Sima. Hate groups have strategies to recruit alienated white kids. They make them feel part of community. White people who are progressive need a strategy that is proactive. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely kind of jumping the gun a little bit when it comes to community. But yeah, I think the community aspect is so important. But to circle back really quickly to what parents can do, if the parent is already kind of down that right-wing rabbit hole, then you got to go back another step and now convince a 40, 50, 60-year-old that, hey, what you're thinking is kind of wrong, which is not an easy task. But if you're not a part of that, I would not say don't ban your kids from doing anything, because all that's going to do is make them go back to that community more, because it's like, well, they don't know what, every 15-year-old is the smartest kid on the planet. All right. Like that's always important to remember. So, and like, I know from experience that it's like some of my friends who their parents tried to ban things from them, they figured out other ways to do it just without them knowing. And now instead of being able to intervene and be like, you can still do this, but here are some things to think about, and please like ask questions to these people. Now they're just like, well, they're wrong, I'm right. They're even more right than I am. So I'm just going to go deeper into this community.
Yeah. And I would say if you see your kid going deeper into this community, don't give up on your kid. Like,
No.
stay with them and keep pulling them out. There's another article in the Washington Post about a Jewish mom in suburban Washington, and her son got lured into extremist hate groups that were actually anti-Semitic, but she had to stay with him and was able to like pull him back out.
Yeah. Boy, it's just. I do want to touch on the alienation topic though, because
Yes, please
that's a
do.
really, 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 really good one. When you don't, humans always want to have a community. We're social creatures. We naturally gravitate towards that, and so I don't think that these 2.5, 3 years of forced isolation because of a plague um, has helped at all. But even before then, it's like we have discouraged communities in a lot of these suburban areas because, let's face it, every house is similar. There's not good community centers. There's just capitalist strip malls everywhere. That's like, well, what do you want to go do? Oh, spend money. Well, I don't have any money to spend. All right, well, I guess then stay home, because what else can you go do? Um, and so then you're just sitting kind of by yourself in front of your computer. And like, I'm not going to say the internet's a problem. I think it definitely accelerates a lot of this stuff, but it definitely drives more alienation. And so it's like, and a lot of these kids, like, they don't have a lot of in-person friends, or something's going on at their school, or even sometimes even in their home life where their parents are just not in the picture, or they're getting abused in some kind of, facet. And so now, even if these kids weren't right wing or didn't really believe in any of this kind of stuff, well, great, now they have friends. And then the more that these friends keep, friends, quote, quotations, they keep talking to them, and they're like, oh, and again, no one ever recruits a Nazi by being like, yeah, we're Nazis. Like, do you want to come? No, they don't do that. And so they offer up this community as in, you get to be one of us. You get to fit in. Oh, you're having problems with school? Oh, you're having problems with girls? Yeah, man, like, so are we. And then boom, you get the connection.
Yes.
And to Sima? So I do apologize
Sima.
if I,
Yes.
yeah, Sima. Yeah, I apologize if I mispronounce your name. For the progressive strategy, I think there is definitely a little bit of blame to be had on some people on the left, because it's so easy to be like, oh, well, they're just stupid. Like, oh, they're too far gone. Like, I can't do anything about that. Instead of looking at it from, a lot of these people are just, they're lonely. They're scared. They don't understand what's going on in the world. And they're getting offered up a strongman savior like figure to be like, oh, well, I know all the problems in the world that I can fix. And it's scary right now. The world is pretty scary. And so instead of just looking at it and like, oh, they're too far gone, it's like, well, let's actually talk about the solutions that we have. And instead of all the progressives and left-wing people just bickering over which is the right solution, the right doesn't care which the right solution is. They just have a solution. They'll lie, of course, but like, we all, like, people on the left also have solutions. So we need to start promoting that message, and we do need to get a plan together to talk to them, to talk to these young kids, to be like, hey, what they're saying is wrong. Here is why it's wrong. Yes, it doesn't feel good. Yes, it's not fun to come to terms with the fact that, like, I just listened to a podcast about how big of a piece of garbage John Wayne was. And it's like, for a lot of people, John Wayne is the ideal American man, even though he married a 14-year-old in Mexico. Like, they don't promote that at all.
Mm.
Yeah, I had 3 kids with her.
I didn't know this part about John Wayne. Wow.
Yeah, he was also known to brutally beat women in public. Yeah, not a good person. John Wayne is not a good guy, but they don't tell that. All they see is he's this gruff American man that gets things done, and like, oh, like a woman's mouthing off. Oh, well, he'll put her in his place because of so many other circumstances. But then they take that. Oh, that's the ideal man. And they see other people that are emulating what people like that are doing, and they're like, okay, well, they're right. And for the progressives to say, well, no, like, he's a bad person. Here's what you should be like. Don't tell them what they should be like. No one should tell a child what they should be like. Just be like, what do you like? What are you interested in? Let's go through that.
Yes. No one wants to be told what they should do. That is one of the hardest parts of this conversation. So a few months ago, I attended a Right to Life huge rally here in San Francisco, just to kind of observe, what they were doing in their messaging. It was super interesting. The way it kicked off, after a priest got up there and gave a long mansplaining about everything. They had women of all different ages and races get up and share their story of having had an abortion and deeply regretting it, and that their activism is rooted in trying to prevent someone else from having this experience. And I contrasted that. So it was like a kind of a welcome sinner. So even though, I am 100% diametrically opposed to these women's beliefs, there's no way I'm not going to sit there and like honor their pain and their story,
Yeah.
And so, whereas with the left, it's like, oh, and you're finally coming into consciousness about this. You are terrible. You should have known this a long time ago. Why are you just finding out about this now? Like, as opposed to like, oh, there was a time when I didn't understand this stuff too.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you're here. And I want to help you deepen your understanding of these things with a lot of compassion and care for that person, because it is very tenuous, especially when you're talking about young people, from the age of like 15 to 25. Like, your prefrontal cortex is not fully formed. Your amygdala, you've got your hormones, you've got peer influences, and cataclysmic environmental disasters, economic uncertainty, this cleaving of all the wealth accumulating in the 1%, everyone else being pushed down, and like skyrocketing college debt and all these other pressures. So no wonder young people are feeling like, what the hell is happening? There's no sense of stability there. And I want to, Moms Allyship Against Racism, thank you for joining us. That is the truth. They give them a feeling of belonging, and they validate their feelings of anger. Watch a Ben Shapiro video. Watch what is that guy's name? James
Jordan Balthazar Peterson. That's not his real middle name. I just refuse to say it because he's a garbage human.
Yes, they stroke their egos and validate their feelings of pain.
Yeah. And so there's a really interesting concept in protesting and making change in either direction, for left or for right or for whatever you want to have happen, which is that you cannot make change within the rights of law, right? Because for a lot of people, the way that they see it is, well, like, you can't ask your oppressor for your rights back because they're not going to give it to you. And now, as a cis hetero white male, you already have all of the rights. But a lot of the right-wing, thought leaders, or whatever you want to call them, they are acting as in they're on the precipice of losing all of their rights, right? Like, the Libby cities are going to come and strip all your guns away. Oh, they're going to tax gasoline so heavily you'll never be able to drive anywhere. Oh, the women are going to make men subservient. Like, they're scaring them, coupling it with the real world situations of wealth inequality, climate change, resource problems, like extreme political instability. They're coupling all those together with irrational fears that they are already promoting, right? And so they are able to get them to do violence because they give them an action plan, right? Where it's like, you are you're the last line of defense for the white male, or whatever the hell they want to say. And so that's how they're able to stroke their egos, because they're like, you're a patriot, you're a strong man, you're a proud boy. That's a hate group. If anybody doesn't know, don't look them up and just stay away from them. But they're able to use the concept of you have to work outside the law to continue to get your rights back. At least that's the way they see it. And that's how they're able to get them to push them to violence so quickly. Because oftentimes it only take a couple months till they're like marching around with rifles, because they have got them so scared and so angry that violence is the only option left.
And then couple that, you said it's on both sides.
Yeah, it's absolutely on both sides. Like, there's been a lot of left-wing protests that have done that as well. Like, I mean, like, the Russian Revolution of 1917 wasn't exactly a peaceful thing, like look at abasement, for I cannot remember their names right now. It's like Tsar Nicholas, his whole family that was like butchered in a basement. Yeah, like because the exact same thing. Extreme wealth inequality, extreme environmental issues, like environmental resource issues, and anger. People are just so angry that they don't know what else to do, and so therefore violence works. It's sad to say, but like historically speaking, violence almost always works. It just always usually happens on the right, not the left.
Yes. But what we're seeing now, like with the Supreme Court stripping for the first time ever a constitutional right away from the American people, even though the vast majority of Americans support that right, even Americans living in states that are acting to ban that right, the majority of people in those states support that right, but that this minoritarian rule does not care
No.
what the majority wants. So we vote, we do all the things we're supposed to do, and even though we're participating, this minority is trampling on us. So yeah, what how can we change this? It makes, I can understand why people want to turn toward violence. I don't myself advocate violence. I believe in peaceful civil disobedience. And I do think we're going to need peaceful civil disobedience and to shut entire cities down, general strikes, etc., because it's not going to be enough to just vote and participate in the political process, to reassert our democracy. Um, uh, but coming back to young white men, you shared in one of your podcasts a really interesting study about depression and misogyny, and I'd love for us to talk about that study.
Yeah.
Yes. And
Yeah.
some progressives sometimes are so self-righteous, 100%. So
Yeah.
we have to like humble ourselves and remember when we were in the stage of the people that we're trying to communicate with. I'm not saying that we can't, I'm not saying to coddle their feelings or to never talk about the hard stuff. I'm saying when we are initially trying to reach out to people, especially young white men, how can we engage with them in a way that we don't come across as superior or that they are wrong in some way, but that we're inviting them to come along with us?
Yeah. In my opinion, the easiest way to do that is to just get them interested in what the history is, and not inherently say that they're wrong in their beliefs, but just show that their beliefs may be unfounded, and just be like, this is education, nothing more, nothing less. Like, this is what actually happened. This is the true history. And it's like, to anybody that, like, quick example before we get into the study. It's like, I definitely have met some people that don't want to believe that, please pardon my French here, this is literally what it's called. Operation Wetback was a real thing.
Mm.
Do you know about that one?
Yes.
Yeah. A lot of people don't want to believe that that's real, and that's how we got ICE, and that's how, like, the problem at the border is so intense is because of this one operation. And it's like, people don't want to believe that. And so it's like, I'm not saying that it's not fun. No one wants to learn about atrocities. But sometimes you have to, and that's part of the history. And so if you want a lot of these people to not see you as a self-righteous, self-righteous asshole, you need to be willing to talk to them as an educator, not as I'm better than you or self-righteous.
Thank you so much. As an educator, and also um, like presenting the facts, as Ruben was saying, we need to clarify who harmed who benefited from that harm, and what we as white people who are alive today, what is our responsibility to make things right today. I don't feel I don't feel guilty about what my ancestors did. That happened before. That wasn't me. I didn't
Yeah.
do that. I wasn't alive then. I didn't, you know. Um, what I am responsible for is my life today and the way I have accumulated wealth as a result of these past things. And what am I going to do in my lifetime to not pass feelings of white superiority to my kids, to heal from my intergenerational trauma, not pass it on to my kids, and to repair with my resources what my ancestors took.
Hmm? Yeah, it's less ideal when people try to pin that together, where it's like this happened 150, 200 years ago, but that means you should feel guilty about it. And it's like, no, it's not, buddy. It's not how this works. And I get it because you make a boatload of cash off this. I can listen. I'll respect the grift. All right, it's a great grift if you want to have a lot of money. It's just that you're morally bankrupt and no. Um, anyway, back to that study really quickly. I think a big problem with a lot of these kids is that depression is really, really high in the United States. According to the National Institute of Health in 2020, there was about 21 million adults that had at least one major depressive episode throughout the year. That's 8% of all US adults, and that accounts for people 18 and up. And then the prevalence of adults, like younger adults with a major depressive episode, was highest among individuals aged 18 to 25.
Mm.
The exact age range that most people start to kind of get engaged in a lot of these groups. It's because they're depressed, they don't know how to deal with it, and they're obviously having tons of feelings of change, and just they're looking for something to help them.
In a society that does not have a mental health care system, and in a society in which we are continuously bombarded with all this trauma,
mm-hmm.
and no way to process it, and very few, like, imagine I grew up in a household where my father was terminally depressed. It's really hard. Then how do you, like, you don't have role models of how to handle depression or get better.
No,
Yeah.
I would argue you have role models. They just tell you to man up and deal with it because
Mm.
men don't have feelings.
Mm.
Like
Yes.
that's super common.
Yeah.
And like to go back to the big action heroes, right? Like John Wayne, Clint Eastwood, Sylvester Stallone, like these kind of
Arnold
old.
Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, it's like they're all manly men. They don't have feelings. They don't get attached to women. They're just manly men.
And they get it done.
Yeah, no matter the cost, they always get it done.
And also to your point, like the way Hollywood has played such a huge role in creating these narratives from the very first feature length film, which was Birth of a Nation, about white supremacy and protecting the delicate white woman from the subhuman rapist black man.
Mm-hmm.
And then the role of white men and all, and how that led to like the national explosion of the Ku Klux Klan. But coming back to your study.
Yeah, so this study was done in the American Journal of Men's Health in 2018 by a whole bunch of doctors. You ready? Derek K. Iwamoto, Jennifer Bradley, Aylin Kayla, and Athena Park. And they wanted to see, like, how does masculinity and depression kind of mix? And they have their aptly named study title, Masculinity and Depression, a longitudinal investigation of multidimensional masculine norms among college men.
Whoa, that's
boy,
a
howdy.
lot of words.
Boy, howdy. That's a big, crazy title.
We'll put the link to the study underneath the video.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh boy, it is a really good study. It's pretty dense, so take it in bites. That's my recommendation. But something that they found in this study, and like the way that they did it was they went among a bunch of the East Coast Ivy League campuses, and they gave a bunch of guys $20, and they're like, "Hey, let's talk about depression. What makes you feel better? What makes you feel worse? Like, how do you deal with this?" And basically, what they found was that the more masculine, norm scores they had, the higher depression scores they often had. Specifically, the masculine norms like playboy and self-reliance of like, you're a man, do it yourself, you don't need outside help, were really related to being depressed, as well as power over women and emotional control were some of the highest correlators that showed you had either more depression or that you're stifling it even more. Because in a lot of their minds, women are supposed to be emotional. Women are supposed to have all their feelings, that they can't make rational decisions because they're all emotional. Which is, by the way, a great grift that the male population got going on. Because I've never seen a woman punch a wall because they were mad.
Right? I've never seen a woman ask a senator, do you like beer?
Oh, God, yeah, that's never seen that happen before. Never once.
Don't even get me started. So, okay, yeah. But what you're saying is that the men who had the most misogynistic kind of orientation were also the most depressed. Is that what this study is saying?
Yeah, more or less. Their results were slightly inconclusive because some people just took the money and just didn't answer the questions because they're 18 and they want beer money. But the correlation was pretty strong. That the more depression score, like the more that they showed that they weren't feeling well, the more they used like toxic masculinity or more misogynistic means to help themselves feel better, but without addressing the underlying problem.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And does that correlation resonate with you?
Me personally, I've seen it through people that I know. Mm-hmm. For me personally, like I just go out and climb mountains when I feel sad. I just go touch rocks. Like touching rocks, like that's my thing. But like I'm also just like used to being in a family that kind of wears their heart in their sleeves, and like we talk about our feelings. We talk about why we're feeling this way, what we can do to not feel this way, or how to move past this in a healthy way. And I think for a lot of these young guys who are going to these extremist groups, they don't have that support system, or they grew up in a way that they never got to discuss their feelings in an honest way, being like, yeah, I feel sad today because XYZ. It's just, you're a man, stop talking about it. You provide everything. You're the protector. You're the patriot. You're the man. Instead of having that honest conversation of, no, you're a person with feelings and you should have feelings and you should feel them in a healthy way. And the way this study, I think, relates a lot to a lot of these hate groups is that it's risk-taking, emotional control, and power over women, as well as violence. Like that was one of the biggest things that they noticed, is that it's like being able to fight somebody, being able to do violence, being able to control violence was a big part of having the heteronormative feelings within the study. And depressed guys often wanted to, like, they used violence a lot to deal with their emotions. So if we circle back, you have a young kid who did not have that system of support to deal with emotions, that is obviously depressed, that doesn't really think that women are people, and likes to engage in violence. That's the perfect recipe for the hate group to be like, hey, life's scary, women suck, you're not getting laid, well, come join us. Like you get to do the violence against your enemies because we will support you in doing that. You are going to protect XYZ, whatever their rhetoric is. You get to protect the thing that you were afraid of happening through violence that you already want to do. Yay! It's cool, fun, and good.
Oh my God, it's terrifying.
It's not good. It's really bad.
I think that is exactly. I mean, when on YouTube, sometimes Ben Shapiro videos will pop up, or that other guy, what's his name?
Jordan B. Peterson.
Yes, and that's exactly what they're saying.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like. Speaking of Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, who, by the way, ate only meat for like a year straight.
Pardon?
He ate meat exclusively for like a year straight to like cure something in his brain. I don't know exactly what. He has a really interesting quote from a TED style talk. I just want to throw that in there because I don't like him. So I'm biased there. Anyway, In a TED Talk style presentation, he has probably one of the worst things I've ever heard when it comes to dealing with emotions and like how to help people. Quote, the question to some degree is how do you help someone who is lost? The answer is if they're willing to not be lost, then you can't help them. It's confusing off the bat, but it sounds like something a smart person would say. The way that I always understood it was that if they want to be lost, then you shouldn't help them at all. Like if it's hard to get someone to do something because they don't want to do it, well then screw them. Like nope, I just can't do anything. And so the way that I see it is that it's like if somebody is fighting tooth and nail to not deal with their emotions, to get out of these hate groups and to actually learn about the world in an honest, realistic way, you shouldn't help them at all because they're too far gone. And that goes along the lines of self-reliance. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. It's the world that's the problem. It's not you that's the problem. And the world is too far gone to be fixed. So therefore, you should do violence to end it, to cleanse it.
I love your podcast and the premise of your podcast. Share a little bit about how you are doing a counter narrative to that via your podcast.
Yeah, so I run a podcast called A Modern Proposal. It is based off the almost 300-year-old essay by Jonathan Swift. Oh, sorry. You go ahead. You can read that.
Oh, yes. Jessica Williams says, Brene Brown has great insight into toxic masculinity, specifically about male pain and how it's damaged all of us. Thank you, Jessica.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's definitely something my show tries to challenge at least a little bit. So yeah, Modern Proposal is based off a almost 300-year-old essay by Jonathan Swift about his essay was called A Modest Proposal, in which he satirically suggested to eat baby flesh to deal with the Irish potato famine of the 1700s. It was supposed to be like it was making fun of the English and the Irish government because they weren't doing really anything to help anybody. They're just like, it kind of seems like your problem. And so he wrote that essay to blatantly make fun of them, and obviously for some shock value too, just to show like how serious the situation is. That, well, if we just ate the babies, it would, less mouths to feed and more mouths are getting fed, like problem solved. And so I took that idea and I kind of ran with it with modern issues. So I recently did an episode about male depression that kind of goes through all of this, that it talks about like where it's coming from, who is perpetuating it, who is not doing anything to help anybody. And then I rounded off with a very satirical solution to make fun of people, to make fun of the people who are like, well, there's just nothing we can do. Like, that's the point, that it's like, it's a problem that's so serious that a morally bankrupt satirical solution could in theory work minus, like the ethical problems.
Yes. But it's also, I just like that you are engaging in this conversation about these real problems that people are facing and presenting some kind of solution. I think is very important to try and help younger people see, okay, yes, this is not hopeless. As Miriam Kaba says, hope is a discipline. And when you listen to like Angela Davis speak, she's always optimistic about what is coming next. She's never like, oh, this is the end. Like, we have to remain engaged. And I know that young people are always the ones who lead social change. And so it's our responsibility as older folks to support younger leadership and give you all the resources and platforms that you need to exert change.
Yeah, and I think this is really interesting because I've heard this a lot when it comes to younger people wanting to make change, is that, well, it's just not fair. Yeah, progress is not going to be fair. It's never going to be fair. That's not how progress works. Like during the women's suffrage movement, right? If the older women that were born in like the 1850s and then were older women that, well, I didn't get to vote, they shouldn't get to vote either. No. Yes, of course you didn't get to vote. That's what progress is. It's not going to be fair to the people who had it before you. So that sucks. I'm sorry. But the way that I see it is that if you are gonna make a positive change, that is meaning that you care more about people who may not be here yet more than you care about the status quo, because once it's better for you, it's better for everybody. And once better for everybody, progress continues to happen. Yeah, it sucks, but why do you want other people to suffer the way that you did? Like, that seems kind of selfish to me.
100%. And why would you only, like, another thing I've never understood, why do you want things that only benefit you and your children? Like, all children are my children. All people are my people. It's not like if my family, flourishes, that's enough. Like, we are part of a community and we're all impact one another. So if there's only one group that is benefiting, I don't think that that's really, everyone needs to benefit for us all. What is it? I am not free while any woman is unfree, even if her shackles are very different from my own, as Audre Lorde said.
Yeah.
Like, we are all invested in each other's liberation, and we can only get liberated collectively, not individually. This whole emphasis on the individual in capitalism is so destructive.
And I think that idea goes heavily into the radicalization of young white men, because again, they're being terrified by whichever media source they want to consume, that their rights are ending. And so instead of them looking at it from the broader picture of, well, yeah, maybe you don't get to reign supreme over somebody, but now everybody gets to be better. They just leave out. They just leave off that second part. So, well, you don't get to reign supreme anymore. What are you going to do?
The fascinating book "Dying of Whiteness" by Jonathan Messel, where he interviews white men in Missouri, Tennessee, and some other state. But it's about how these white men would rather vote against their own self-interest. Like, for example, in Missouri, they have extremely high rates of suicide. That the number one cause of death by gun in our country is suicide. And it's white men who are the number one group of people who are killing themselves. So he visits like a group of survivors, surviving families of men who've killed themselves by gun. And he's like, well, do you think that perhaps regulating guns might be helpful? Because there's a whole body of research that shows if there's a gun in the house, the person is much more likely to kill themselves than if there is no gun in the house when the suicide ideation arises. And the people are like, oh no, don't take our guns away. Our guns are our freedom.
Well, yeah, like, if I'm going to make this story really, really brief. Perhaps you've heard it before. Now, I can't speak to the validity of the story, but it's an interesting thought experiment to think about. So a while back, a bunch of researchers got together. They got a whole bunch of monkeys in a cage, and they put a banana at the top of a ladder. Obviously, one climbs up, go get it. And every time a monkey comes up the ladder, go get the banana, the researchers would just spray all the monkeys down with ice cold water. And they did it enough times so that they learned, oh, well, if someone goes up that ladder, we get sprayed with water. And so then they would just, beat up the one monkey who did it. And then they took one of the monkeys who wasn't trained out of the pen. They took one that was trained out of the pen. They put one that wasn't trained back into the cage, and they saw what happened. Same deal. Try to go get up to get the banana. They got beat up, and then they rinse repeated until there was no more monkeys left that have ever gotten initially sprayed before. And they just kept doing it. And every time one would try to go up and get it, they just beat them up for it. And no one, and the thought process is, if you do something long enough without a reason, it just becomes second nature. It's like, well, that's just how it always is. And so I think in a lot of ways, that idea that, well, guns are our freedom is just so ingrained that everybody in certain demographics in certain areas always know about it. It's always part, it's my freedom. Second Amendment, all that kind of stuff. And so when they start talking about this, like, hey, this is going to help you guys. You're like, well, we've always done it this way. Too bad, so sad.
Now you're trying to take, again, something that is precious to us, that is deeply rooted in our nation's history and traditions, in the words of Samuel Alito. We need to start winding down. This has been such a fantastic conversation. I have a last question for you, and then I want to ask you to share like how folks can follow you and get more access to your podcast and all of those things. My last question to you: if you could wave a magic wand and get white people to either start doing something or stop doing something, what would it be and why?
Oh boy. I'm gonna do both for you. I'm gonna do one that I want to happen and one that they need to stop doing.
Yes.
The one they need to do is they need to read more books. They need to start reading from people of color's perspectives. I would suggest the book Migra, Between the World and Me, and and Ho Chi Minh's memoirs about his time living in France as an Asian person. And for them to stop doing is they need to stop acting like everything is just fine and these problems will just magically go away, because historically it never does, right? When certain groups of people stop fighting against, let's call it what it is, fascism, it ends very badly. It happened in Bosnia. It happened in Germany. It happened in South Africa. It happened in Rwanda. It keeps happening. So you need to stop acting like everything's just fine, because it's not fine. And because when you have an entire generation of people that believe that their world is crumbling before their eyes, and that the only way to deal with this problem is to killing people, you're going to have just a lot of dead people and nothing's going to change.
Wow. Thank you for that wording, Parker.
You're welcome. It's very happy. It's a happy thing, ain't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, I shouldn't joke about that.
It's Resma Menachem says we have to act like we saw what we saw on January 6th. That was not the end. That was their try, and now they're learning.
That was the beer hall. That was the beer hall putsch. Yeah, like that's what it was. It didn't go well for them, but
yeah, they're learning.
Why would they stop? No one did anything to stop them until it was far too late. Like,
okay. How can people follow you and listen to your podcast?
All right. You can follow me in a number of places. One, the Woods, good place to follow me. Two, you can follow me on Twitter at Parker J Writes, and you can follow the podcast at modern underscore proposal on Instagram and Twitter. I have a personal Instagram. Find it if you can. And you can listen to my fiction podcast called A Yellow Sun Hat and Other Stories, as well as a modern proposal on wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Google, Spotify, the like. I might be writing a book right now, so be on the lookout at some point in time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Parker. I'm so excited to have someone from my home state, Colorado, someone who, I know through your mom, who we graduated from high school together. It's really nice. And next week, I'm actually featuring another guest from Colorado, Dr. Corey Wong, which is fantastic. Her TED Talk on feminist friendship is a must watch. And I'm super grateful to have Dr. Corey Wong. And we'll be returning to our regular time. That we had to adjust the time today for another engagement that I have. But we will go back to 8 a.m. Pacific, 11 a.m. Eastern on July 14th. Thank you so much, Parker, for joining us. Thank you for everyone roommate comments, and please do share this podcast or this live stream with someone who needs to hear it. And until next week, go out and collect your cousins.
Or don't. It's your life.